Good morning, distinguished guests. First, let me thank you, the organizers, for inviting me here and for the opportunity to share Estonian experience on how to counter the threat in cyberspace. There's almost 10 years anniversary of those incidents that put Estonia on map with regard to cyber. And although technically not that complicated, and the effects that the attacks had on our digital ecosystem were not that serious, what happened, the media hype that followed, made the event much more serious, to sound much more serious than it really was. It was the first time when our politicians, at least, and then a lot of other countries as well, recognized the importance of cyber in international conflicts. So that what made it different was that in part of the political conflict, one country decided to use a cyber domain in order to influence the decisions of another country. So at least in Estonia, the public became aware of how much do we depend on using ICT, that the bits and bytes actually actually can influence the way you consume the different services, whether it's banking, how you get your information, etc., etc. So both the politicians and the public more widely became aware of what's happening. So the decisions that we made after the attacks, looking back at it now, 10 years later, almost 10 years later, we can say that most of the decisions that we made were the right ones. So today I'm going to talk about that. It's about how to have a security by design when you develop your digital society, how important it is to have a trustworthy digital identity, how important it is to have a baseline security requirements, how to have a cert in place, and etc., etc. But most importantly, the importance of cooperating when repelling the cyber attacks. The public-private partnership was put to test in Estonia in 2007. The success of us repelling the attacks at that time was that the competent people in basically the cybersecurity experts in public and private sector cooperated and very quickly managed to repel the attacks. So this is the model that we are using also for the future. So, but when we begin, before I begin, let me very briefly tell you about the digital society in Estonia. First, we are a very small country in the corner of everything. We're up north, a border country for NATO, border country for European Union. We are a small country, and we have embraced digital world, at least when it comes to public services or how we run our country, more than most of other countries at least in Europe. So there are some basic facts of what we do. Almost all the services that the government is providing, you can do over the internet. You can access over the internet. Marriage, you have to be physically present. Buying real estate, you have to be physically present. Almost everything else you can do over the internet. Like taxes in Estonia, most of the people, they do the tax declarations over the internet. Because we have secure electronic identity, there is almost non-existent identity fraud. If you compare to United States, for instance, where because of the identity fraud, the IRS suffers, I think in 2015, the number was $20 billion lost. In Estonia, it's non-existent, 0. The bank transactions, oral, electronical. We have different services that I'm not going to go into this, but probably one of the most important one, again, as far as I know, we are the only country in the world. Since 2005, you can vote over the internet. In last general elections, 1/3 of the votes were casted over the internet. So because every Estonian has a mandatory electronic identity, which can be used to digitally sign documents which are as valid as physical signatures. We estimate that we save 1 week per year per capita time for the citizens. They don't have to stand in line in banks or in talking with the bureaucrats. Instead, they can spend their time much wisely. So if you look at the 2007 attacks, then why it is still valid, although it's 10 years ago already, but why we can still talk about that is first, they were politically motivated, as I already said. Last year, we saw a different politically motivated attacks. So it's interesting to see how the politically motivated attacks have developed in past 10 years. In 2007, the aim was to disrupt the services and to attack the government authority. But the last year we saw how the political process was influenced through cyber attacks. Ukraine is a perfect case study on how cyber is used in conventional conflict as well. Yesterday we heard about the artillery example. We all know the energy example, and the speaker after me will be talking about that. DDoS, although in 2007 there were a few thousand computers at the time were different parts of the world who were attacking us. Last year we saw how more than 100,000 things connected to internet were used to have a very disruptive DDoS. So DDoS is not gone; it's still here. And as I said, when in 2007 the attack was against vital services in case of Estonia, then what we've seen now, when the attacks are more serious, is again, yesterday we heard a presentation about how to counter the APT threats. The attacks against the vital services or the critical information infrastructure have become serious as well. What we've seen in Estonia, at least, and it's reported widely internationally as well, is that the attacks are more, not only anymore about how to get information, and they are used for espionage, but we found traces of APT in our energy sector as well, which has made a conclusion that what we've suspected for a long time, that the aim of our adversary in cyberspace is not only to gather information or disrupt, but to actually break down the industrial control systems and the services that are based on them. And my first slide, the map of Estonia, you can see that there is only in our part of the world, in our geographic region, there is only one political adversary, so you can conclude yourself who I'm talking about. What we've seen last year is the combined, the use of cyber with other instruments of power projection, the information warfare. In Ukraine, we see how it's combined with conventional warfare. Again, our eastern neighbor has demonstrated how well they have implemented the cyber domain into their power projection capabilities. They're very good in using the lack of norms in cyberspace. A lot of the activities, for instance, the DNC hack, can you imagine that you would send your agents to break into the offices of a party in another country? But in cyberspace, you can do that. And another trend is that it's becoming more and more common to use offensive cyber in trying to influence the politics or decision-making of another country. So talking about Estonia, so what do we protect? So we have become very dependent on ICT. Our land registry is only in a digital form. Our state gazette where all the laws are published, it's only in a digital form. When you go fishing, you need a fishing permit. You can buy the fishing permit where you already are on the boat on the lake or sea over the mobile phone via the secure electronic identity. You can vote on that same boat, sign agreements by using your mobile phone on that boat. So IT has become what we call, using IT has become what we call our digital way of life. People are used to have those services provided by the government. And it's all based on trust. The people are trusting the technology is secure, that the government is handling their data securely. And the trust is important because the trust itself can be attacked as well. Most of the attacks, or all of the attacks that we know of against our internet-based voting system have been PR attacks. No technical attacks have been successful or that we have detected that have been successful. But the PR attacks that claim to have different technical aspects involved, those we see constantly, but they haven't been proven. So we use IT to actually reinforce the values we live by, and for a small society like ours with limited resources, IT has been proven to be a very good tool to bring the government and the citizens together. So our approach to cyber defense is, I'm sorry, I have a military background, so I'm using the military terminology, is like a total defense. Everybody has a role, everybody plays a role. It starts from an individual with the average or a common man using the smartphone, computer, whatever. I'm going to talk about community. I already mentioned that our approach is very much community-based, public-private partnership, academia. And we are focusing on building the culture, the will to defend the country in cyberspace. Organizations have to protect their processes, and of course the government has a different roles, but the main role that I'll be focusing here is the protection of critical information infrastructure. So the government, usually how the governments react is with regulation. So Estonian government reacted to the 2007 attacks by adopting the cybersecurity strategy. We were the first one in Europe to have one. Now we already have a second one, and it's also at the end of its lifespan. So we are about, next year we will have a third one. And that's, the important thing is to have a plan, what you want to do. What we did next was to have legal acts in place. And basically what those legal acts did was they created a system of how we protect the critical information infrastructure. We adopted the baseline security requirements. We are too small of a country to have our own security standards. So we looked at the country that we have historical ties to, Germany, and basically took over the IT Grundschutz and modified it to fit into the Estonian system, added some bits and pieces with regard to electronic identity, cloud, etc. We have developed our own standards, but most of it is the German IT Grundschutz. We designated an authority. My agency was created as a result as a government agency to oversee the implement of those security standards. These are obligatory for all the government agencies and vital service providers. The government designated companies that provide vital services. There are 180 companies in Estonia that are considered to be vital service providers. So they have to implement the same security standards. And then the focus is on, of course, on to have as good a situational awareness as possible. My agency is also an ISP for the government agencies, so we have a quite good overview of what's happening in government information systems. And the private sector then has an obligation to report. That obligation is there in place since 2009. And the validation of that what we did is good became, at least in one form, last year when the European Union adopted its NIS directive, which basically partly mirrors the laws that we had in place already in 2008 and 9. The NIS directive doesn't go as far as our legislature, but it still basically follows the same path that we took. It's important to designate an authority with clear responsibilities. There we still have some room for improvement. We have covered quite well the parts how to prepare, how to build resilience, and how to prepare for a cyber attack, but how to react. My agency is the lead agent in case of a large-scale cyber attack, meaning that we are the owners of the national emergency plan for a large-scale cyber incident, and the lead agent according to that plan. But we don't have enough tools actually to use when reacting to a large-scale cyber attack, like designating importance of traffic in the internet, or designating which services should remain and which services we can drop. So we still need some work to do. So organization, and that's probably the most difficult part, is how we get the organizations to turn attention to the cybersecurity. As in any country, it's a very decentralized model. Ours is a very decentralized model. The first line of defense is among the organizations. And there are 3 levels of people that you need to approach. The first is the management, and the management to understand the cyber risks. It's in Estonia, the government agencies and the vital service providers, because they have an obligation to follow the baseline security requirements, which also foresee the risk assessment and business continuity plans. Those companies are much more mature, but the civil society, for instance, they don't pay any attention to cybersecurity. And remember, the DNC hack, that's a party. That's not a part of the critical information infrastructure. So at least in case of Estonia, we don't have any tools to address that types of attacks, other than just to try to talk to people and convince them that they should turn attention there. So if the management understands the risks and then adopts necessary documentation, policies, regulations, that gives enough guidance for technical personnel to implement those policies. And as probably in any other country, most of the attacks that we saw last year were possible because of this technical IT personnel was either lazy or stupid. But for some reason they didn't patch up the old software or other activities that they missed to do. But most of the attacks were caused by that. And then it's, of course, I already talked about, it's the users, it's how to develop the cyber hygiene. So this is our community-based approach. We call it the collective brain. This is what saved us in 2007, is that you have in necessary places, in important places, you have competent people who know each other, who can act in a synchronized way. So this is the community that we aim to build, and we believe that this will give advantage in case of cyber conflict. It's not only while defending the entire digital society that we've built has been done together with the private sector. It's the government is rarely an example of how to buy wisely or how to develop IT systems wisely. It's at least in case of Estonian system, a lot of the innovative ideas have become from the private sector, and the government has gone along and adopted it. Data integrity, it's very important for a highly digitalized society like ours. It's just the latest example of how one Estonian company is providing technology that allows to timestamp your data by using blockchain technology. The government is already using it, providing it as a service. We are providing it as a service to other government agencies in order for them to ensure data integrity. So for instance, when I talked about the State Gazette, so that State Gazette is everyday timestamped by using blockchain technology in order to ensure the data integrity there. The individual, I already talked about that, so I'm not gonna cover that anymore. But to conclude, I would just like to say that I completely agree with the previous speaker that we believe that the most of the attacks that were internationally covered last year could have been avoided by applying the basic security standards with good cyber hygiene. So we still think that we should focus on that, although the very fancy technology to detect attacks, etc., are important, but we shouldn't. The main effort still should go to raise awareness in different levels, politicians, managements of companies, IT personnel, and average users, on how to implement those security standards that are out there in different countries. They are almost all of them are quite good, whether it's United States, German, or any other. So yes, the decisions and the approach we took 10 years ago has paid off and will continue in this road. So thank you, and I'll have about 6 minutes to answer your questions, so I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for a very informative presentation. I wanted to ask about, there are several countries that have publicly announced their cyber offensive capabilities, including Russia, France, and Mr. Prince previously, he talked about also deterrence capability. So would you see that move into cyber offensive capability actually reducing the number of attacks, or actually it's a cause for further attacks to happen? So can you give us your take on that, given that you have also talked about your external neighbor?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? Whether offensive capabilities will produce more attacks or?
Yes, or it will reduce it.
To clear, yes, it's about deterrence, as I
Yes.
understand. The question is about whether deterrence works in cyberspace.
Yes.
I don't think the deterrence, only cyber deterrence works. The deterrence as part of a bigger set of tools might work against some actors in cyberspace, like state actors. But then again, this is what we thought 2 years ago, but the last year or year and a half has demonstrated that the deterrence in cyberspace it doesn't work. If a country is willing to take on United States, after everybody knows after the Snowden incident what capabilities that country has, and is willing to take on United States, then one could argue that the deterrence doesn't work. So it's, I would say it doesn't work because in cyberspace it's too complicated. You can hide your tracks, and there isn't any court that is going to decide either whether there was an attack resulted by other country or not. So cyber only doesn't work. You need a bigger and better tool set to apply. So declaring the offensive capabilities, I would say in case of Estonia, if Estonia would declare that it has offensive capabilities, that would probably be bringing some countries to test our resolve to use those offensive capabilities. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I saw one of the action items that's been taken after the attack is that you like publish or you enforce a minimum security requirement. So I would be interested in the model. How did you actually enforce it, and who was under the authority of that minimum security requirement? Is it only the government, or there also certain private sector was also under the authority of that security requirement?
So our national security requirements, we call it ISKE. It's obligatory for the government agencies and then the vital service providers to implement it. We exercise oversight of how those are implemented. The way we built up our system, because we are a small country, we have a very small government. We actually don't have we don't audit it ourselves. The system is built that there should be an independent audit. So it's usually done by the big 4 audit companies, the global ones. And then there is an obligation for the service provider to send the audit results to us. The obligation is to audit every 2 years. What we've seen is that most of the time, why those security requirements are not implemented is because of the lack of qualified personnel. It's not because of the will. Sometimes it is because of the will, because the management doesn't understand the risks. What we've seen is that the risk assessments have done very superficially, and not real actions are coming out of it. So what we do is we use the stick very rarely. If we really see that there is no will to deal with cybersecurity, then we're gonna start the official supervision process. What we try to do is advise more on how to implement it, to use the carrot model. And for instance, with the private companies, I think the best thing that we've done is we've done the security testing. We assess the security policies, the measures taken. We do the pen testing. We've been successful in more than 90% of the cases that we've pen tested the companies, the private companies. For instance, we've switched off UPSs in hospitals, not the medical equipment itself. And these have usually helped for the management to see that this is real. If we can do it, then probably other guys, whether it's a state actor or criminal actors, can do it as well. And the same thing we do with the public sector is trying to advise them on how to better implement it. And when they demonstrate that they are not that keen into cybersecurity, then we use harsher measures. And we are not only using our national standards, we consider, for instance, in financial sector, their internal regulations or international regulations are much higher than our national standards, so we say that it's okay. Aviation, the ISO 27001, we usually consider if it's a company certified, then we're not gonna require that our national standards are implemented, that it covers it. So we have a quite flexible approach there. Yes. Well, thank you. And if you have any other questions, I'm still around there. I think we're out of time. So I'll be happy to answer them later on here in the corridors. Thank you.